Got it. All right. So, hey, welcome back to the Brown Girl Self Care Podcast. I am Bree Mitchell. I'm the host of the show as well as the founder of Brown Girl Self Care. Today, I am so excited because I am in conversation with someone I have wanted to be in conversation with for at least maybe the last year or two since I read her book. This is Mary Frances Winter. She is the founder and the CEO of Winters Group, a 39-year-old diversity and inclusion firm. That is a consulting firm, which is a very long time to be doing this DEI, or as you say, DEIJ work. You're the author of 7 books, including Black Fatigue, which we are going to be diving into today, which I'm really excited about. And also you have a book that's called Racial Justice at Work: How to Talk About Race, Religion, Politics, and Other Polarizing Topics. Welcome to the space. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Yes, absolutely. These are topics that, even after 39 years, we still have to talk about.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. Well, first of all, your book has been called, where are my notes here? They're saying that Black Fatigue is being called one of the most important books on mental health for Black Americans. It's life altering. It should be required reading for Blacks and non-Blacks alike. There's just like so much praise for this book. Why did you write this book? And who is it for?
Thank you for that question. I wrote the book, as you mentioned, in the consulting business and have been in the consulting business, for a very, very long time. And as I was going into organizations a few years ago, doing focus groups and listening sessions with Black and Brown people, they were using this term. They were saying, we're tired. Going to different organizations. So it just wasn't one organization. We're tired. And sometimes I would tease and I'd say, you're 25 years old. How are you tired already? I've been out here a long time. You've been tired. And they'd look at me, like, I respect you, older lady. However, we know we're tired. So it got me to thinking that if the younger generation is already saying that they're tired, of the racism, of microaggressions, of being othered, and all of those things that, just living while Black, right? In essence, just living while Black. And to say it to that depth of just the depth of the sincerity and the pain, actually, that I heard, I said, I've got to write this book on Black fatigue. So my publisher said, who is it for? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, man, it's more for white people, because Black people, we already know we're fatigued. But what I have found is that, in fact, it's not for white people. I mean, some white people have read it and do read it, but it really is for us. And people have told me that they feel validated, they feel affirmed, they feel like, oh my gosh, yes, this happened to me. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm not out here alone, because in a lot of organizations that I go into, that Black person might be the only Black person in that department. Mm-hmm. Maybe not at the whole company, right? But in that department. So they may be the only. And so they're dealing with what goes on with when you're the only one, right? Mm-hmm. And so I found that the book was also very useful for Black people.
Yeah. Speaking of being the only one, I can definitely identify as being the only one, not specifically because I worked for a very large, definitely Fortune 500. I'm wondering if they're even like somewhere
Fortune 100.
Yeah, I'm wondering, and I won't say the business name, but it's a huge corporation. Right. But I was the only one specifically, to my knowledge, in my specific department. But yes, you're right. There's a Black person here, a Black person here. But on my specific team, I was the only Black one. Mm-hmm. And I worked in an office environment where it was hard for me, because not only was I the only one, so I was like in a support role for this larger team. Mm-hmm. My department was a support role for this larger team. And there were Black people that I supported on that team as well. Mm-hmm. I found that I got along much easier with the Black people. There was less headbutting. Mm-hmm. I had my own traumas and stuff that I didn't even know that I had trauma when I was working. I didn't even know, but I couldn't figure out why I kept having these problems with like my non-Black coworkers that just couldn't seem to get me. So reading your book and just allowing what you were saying, especially the chapter, well, all of it's relevant, but especially the chapter that you write specifically about Black women and Black women fatigue. Just hearing what you had to say about that really resonated with me. And it was like, kind of like, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, and studies show that, Black women in particular have a very unique experience. There are articles all the time. There was just one last week about these 3 Black women executives, or they had been executives, and they're no longer, executives, but because of the things that they went through, not being heard, not being valued, not being validated. And there was also another article recently that talked about, it was called Black Women Exodus from the United States. And it was saying that, did you see that one? That Black women
No,
are
I didn't,
actually
but
leaving,
yeah.
Black women are actually leaving the United States, moving to the Caribbean and to Europe, even, and Asia, even, just
So too.
moving outside of the United States, to find places that, I don't know, I'm sure that the racism is there, but it's different, right? And perhaps to find some peace, and to find some solace, and just recognizing that it is, it's challenging.
Yeah, it's hard. And in the book, you talk about how racism breaks us down mentally, emotionally, physically, like in every way that we consider our humanity. For the Black woman who is listening to this podcast episode, can you give her, if she's not familiar, ways that racism can affect us?
Yeah, so there's that one chapter in the book also that talks about how it's all related to health. Racism literally makes us sick is the name of the is the name of the chapter. So this is maternal health. Is it week or month for Black women? And we know that Black women are at least twice as likely to have issues with fertility, at least twice as likely to have low birth weight babies, at least twice as likely to miscarry, have stillborn babies. And that is for women who are, quote, middle class, right? Upper socioeconomic level. So it's not just so we can't correlate it to poverty. We can't correlate it to not having access to health care. It is, as a matter of fact, statistics show that poor white women have a better chance of having a full-term, healthy baby than middle-class Black women. So it affects us in our reproductive, in reproductive aspects. And there are studies that show that these differences are connected to racism because it's not connected to access to care. So when you think about, let's talk about, quote, the professional Black woman, the Black woman who has gone to college, because more Black women go to college than any other group. And so you're educated and now you're going into the, into the workplace, and you are daily dealing with what are called microaggressions, these small little slights. I know when I was in the workplace, the reason I started my own business 39 years ago was because I would come home crying every single night because I just felt so not heard and just felt so, treated poorly, even sexism. So Black women have to deal with sexism and racism, the same. Studies have shown that affirmative action, that white women were the most recipients of affirmative action. They got the most benefit, from affirmative action. Right. So every single day, there is whether you're up in the upper socioeconomic levels or in your middle or lower, wherever you might be, you're subjected to microaggressions, these little slights, can I touch your hair, or, just not being heard in a meeting, not somebody else 5 minutes later says the same thing that you said, but you weren't heard. Feeling that you have to be twice as good to get half as far. So mistakes are looked at. So if you're a Black woman and you make a mistake, it's looked at more critically, than if you're a white woman. White women, white people in general, but white women, are given the benefit of the doubt. When we look at the perception of Black women and, over history, the Aunt Jemima type of perception, and they did, they stopped branding, they retired, put to bed, or whatever, or buried, Aunt Jemima. But when you think about when Black women are held up and heralded and get awards and whatnot, like thinking about Halle Berry in the movie, what was the Monsters Ball? And she got the Academy Award for that. But look at the role that she played that she played in that, right? And so those are the kinds of things that, in corporations, oftentimes Black women are seen as the angry Black woman, right? Or you're too passionate, and why are you so loud, and all of those kinds of stereotypes. And so to the extent that we try to change ourselves, right, to be more like something else. And that's what was happening for me in the workplace. One boss said I was too aggressive, another boss said I wasn't aggressive enough, and so you don't know how to be, right? You don't know how to come in, so that's stressful. That's creating stress, because you do need to need to feed your family. Let's look at the other end of the socioeconomic scale. Black women who have low incomes, that they're working at entry-level jobs. They oftentimes don't have any benefits. A third of Black women are still in entry-level jobs, and many of those entry-level jobs don't provide benefits. They don't provide the resources that are needed. So when you think about, many Black women are single mothers, and there are deep reasons for that date back to slavery. It's not just because Black men are trifling, or there are deep reasons for that. And when you look at that, needing to be a single mother, so there's a saying that says Black men get locked up and Black women get locked out. Black women are 2 times more likely to be evicted from their apartments or their living situations, because they can't pay the rent. So it's a system, and we talk about systemic racism. It's a system that so if you have been evicted, then when you go to I'm getting myself back on my feet now, right? So now I'm going to go and look for another place to live. Well, you have an eviction on your record, so we won't rent to you. So then you're limited to where you can go. And so all of this causes stress. All of this impacts our physical, mental, and emotional well-being. And oftentimes we are caretakers not only for children, but we're caretakers for our elderly parents. And so we might not take care of ourselves. We might not go to the doctor when we have a little pain or an ache, because we can't, because we because we have to go to work, because we have to get the kids to doing this, because we've got to do something for somebody else. And so all of those things are stressors, and they call it weathering, this term weathering. And what that means is that it's intergenerational. And so there's something in our, and I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to go very far into this, but there's something in our biological, makeup system that this kind of stress gets built into your DNA, and then it gets passed down to generation. So we ask, why is it that you've got 3 generations of high, families with high blood pressure, with diabetes, with heart disease? It's because of the stress, and they call it weathering. And there's evidence now that they're doing a lot of research, and there's evidence now that it is racism, not your race, because they used to connect it that, genetically Black people were just, more prone to these things. But the underlying cause of why Black people are more prone to these things is racism.
Profound. Because I never even really thought about it that way, because you're right. When we go into the doctor's office, like when you're a new patient, what is it called? Like an intake form or something like that. And they ask you the different, just your history and things like that. Yeah, what about your father's side and this and that? And they're very careful to figure out, like, okay, heart disease or cancer or I don't know, other issues. But you're right. Like, it's not taken into account. It's taking account the medical history, of course, but it's not giving you the whole view here. Right.
And the medical profession is not taught to have that whole view. So very few medical schools, more now, but over the years, very few medical schools really looked at what they call it, the social determinants of health. What are the social determinants, like environment, like racism? And more Black people live in neighborhoods where the air quality is really poor. So that's environmental racism, right? And lead, right? The water in Flint, Michigan, Jackson, Mississippi, those are all places where it impacted Black people more than any other group.
I want to go back to something that you said, because it triggered something for me when you were talking about just your experience in corporate America. A lot of us have had these corporate experiences that have just drained our souls out of our bodies. I know that I did, and that's one of the reasons why I quit my job in 2019. But just hearing you say just about those microaggressions, for any woman that's listening, that I want them to be thinking or to be aware that they may not even think that it's mentally taxing or emotionally taxing, but it requires energy to
right?
exist in that every day. When I was in the office, like I've been natural for probably like 15 years, I would say. And this is how I typically wear my hair in a wash and go, or it's not really a fast process, but it's called a wash and go.
I know.
For example, I would have a manager who was really cool and all, but he would say things in the office like he would call me Sideshow Bob. He would call me Tracy Chapman, things like that. And so I didn't really look at it as a microaggression. I was so concerned about fitting in and trying to not be, because I already had issues with this group as it is. Like I
Mhm.
was like, I'm not good enough. She doesn't do this, that, like she doesn't have the right attitude because I'm very introverted. So I just keep to
Mhm.
myself. I'm not trying to be out there talking to everybody. So I already had to deal with that. So when they were like, he was saying those things about me, I would just laugh it off because,
Mhm.
I didn't want to make waves. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Mhm.
So hearing you say that you left corporate America to do your own thing, I think that's going to resonate with a lot of women that are listening because a lot of us are doing that.
Black women start their own businesses at least 2 times the rate of anybody else. You know,
Hmm.
we are starting our own businesses at an alarmingly higher rate. Black women, and it's like women, yes, women, but Black women even more so. Black women are starting. I believe I saw a statistic that said Black women start their own businesses at twice the rate of white women, and white women start their own businesses at twice the rate of white men. So a lot of women in general are starting their own businesses because they are not finding it friendly in these large organizations, but Black women in particular.
Yeah, for sure. Can we talk more about the unique challenges that Black women do face when we come to how we intersect in all these different ways? Because you talked about that in your book as well.
Yeah, the intersectionality is so key. And of course, that's a term that was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw when there was a lawsuit some years ago, I think it was in the 80s, where the judge said, well, you can't you can't have a suit that looks at race and gender. You've got to separate, is it the race or is it gender? And so she made the case that these intersecting identities were unique. You know, race has its own issues, gender has its own issues, but when you bring the two together, those issues are compounded. And so she was the first one to, and so today we look at intersectionality as not just race, it can be race, gender, socioeconomics. I've already spoken about that. I'm saying, you're a Black woman who's the CEO of her own company, or a Black woman who's a executive vice president in a large corporation. You've got a Black woman who is at minimum wage, trying to make it. And so that's another intersectionality, socioeconomics, right? And so we have to look at all of those intersections and how do all of those intersections, come together. And so, generations, right? I'm a baby boomer. I'm a, older generation. And, my daughter who's the president now of the company and chief operating officer. She calls herself a Zennial she's at the cusp of millennial and Gen X, right?
Okay.
And so we have different ways of thinking about the world. We have different ways of walking, we have different, ideas and thoughts. And so intersectionality, is really important to consider. So we do exercises with some of our clients where we ask them, to think about their identity. So when you think about, who you are, I think about myself, as an African-American, heterosexual, cisgender, woman with 2 children. I'm widowed. So all of these identities, play into, how I experience the world, my humanity. So I would invite, our listeners to think about all of those intersections that you have that can be stressors, right? They can be
Mhm.
joy as well. You're talking about Black girl joy, they can be joy as well, but they can be stressors. So we're not just, and no one is just one thing. But when we think about the power dynamics in this racialized world, so we live in a racialized world, right? A racialized world where white is on the top and the darker you get. So there's colorism. That's another, issue. And so if you're a light-skinned Black woman, you walk in the world differently than a dark-skinned, Black woman. Things are changing, but even 20 years ago, you would not see a dark-skinned model, modeling, right? I mean, so those are the kinds of things that we have to think about. A colleague of mine, she'll say that she was always told as she was growing up, "Oh, you're pretty cute for a dark-skinned girl." I mean, think about what that does to your psyche, right? To tell somebody, for a dark-skinned girl, you're cute, right? That dark is not, not preferred, but so yeah. So it's complex. There's lots and lots of layers, and that's what the fatigue is about, having to walk in this world every single day and on so many different levels, not being validated as a full human, as a beautiful human, as somebody who, whether your hair is straight or natural, or whether you're large. We've got someone on our team who talks about fatism, a lot, whether you're large or small. We have this image, right, of what beauty looks like. And I talk about that in the chapter, as well. And, Black women, for the most part, don't fall into what that dominant group image is of what is beautiful, right? And so we do all sorts of things like eyelashes. I don't like the eyelashes, but anyway, the eyelashes and the the hair and the weaves and all of that kind of stuff, and bleaching cream. And this is worldwide, so black women all over the world. The market for bleaching cream is like hundreds of billions of dollars. It's a huge market because people want to lighten their skin to look more white. So yeah, it's a lot.
It is a lot. It is a lot. I'm thinking about that bleaching cream, and that is one that's still hard for me to wrap my mind around. But I have to remember that even though I am Black, my experience is not going to be the same as your experience, as my daughter's experience, as my neighbors down the street. Colorism definitely is still very much a thing. I've had to navigate the world, in this skin, in this body, feeling inferior for a lot of my life based on my features, based on my hair, my nose, like whatever, my body, my boobs, my butt, like just my shape or my weight,
Right.
skin color, and all those things. So deep sigh, it is definitely a lot. It's a lot to navigate.
But what's so wonderful, is forums like this and other things that we are doing as Black people, as Black women, to lift each other up. A couple of weeks ago in Charlotte, I was at a Black girls art show. It goes all around the country. And it was just wonderful to see all of these Black women displaying their art, all different kinds of art, all different kinds of media. And I noticed that probably 95% of them had natural hair. And so, me being older, I've had natural hair since the 70s, actually. And I had a colleague, he wasn't even my boss when I was in the corporate world. I had a short natural at that time, a very short natural at that time. And he came in my office and he said, "Will your hair grow?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, you ought to let it."
Mm.
And so, yeah, so that kind of, that happened in the 70s, and I never forget it. I've never forgotten it. Because it hits you, right? It hits you. I'm not going to be accepted unless my hair looks, unless I straighten my hair looks like, a white person's hair to the extent possible. So it is. But what I like is that we are beginning to more so, and I'm seeing it with the younger generations, just really being so okay with who I am. I'm okay. And we're seeing it with, the various entertainers like Lizzo, who's just, being herself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that those are the kinds of images when you see women who are willing to say, like Lizzo, like, yeah, I'm a large girl, right? But I'm gonna, that's who I am, and it's not bad. I don't need to lose weight. I don't need to fit some kind of mold. It's freedom, right? That's what liberation looks like. And so that's what we're all searching for, liberation. I think Black women are now taking care of our health more. I mentioned before, we sometimes don't do that because we've got all these other things that we have to do. But, I see us being involved in, with yoga and exercise and all of those kinds of things. And, you talked about the group that you have, the, Black Women's Circle or something. There are lots of those going on around the country where we're supporting each other, where we're having that forum to just be able to share and to talk. We have a group of girlfriends, 12 of us. We've been getting together. Well, we get together annually and we go someplace, but the last few years, obviously, we haven't been able to because of the pandemic. We're going to start again. But, they're all women who have been in different kinds of, roles. They're educators, they're, from the corporate world, just different kinds of roles. And our opportunity to get together and just let our hair down, so to speak, and not have to not have to pretend, not have to say, oh, can I say that? And, it's just been amazing. And we've been doing that for over 20 years.
I love that so much. And I'm thankful to you because it's women like you and people like you that did the work or started this work years ago that have enabled us to even be where we are right now, have even enabled the millennials. Because I was speaking to a millennial actually yesterday. I did an interview with Brianna Holt. She's the author of a book that I had recently read about just millennials existing in this post-racial. And one of the things that stood out to me that I told her is just like millennials are not, they're not playing. They're not doing this anymore. Like,
Right, exactly. Millennials and Gen Zs, right, exactly. Right,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking though, but to get to that point, it required a lot of work. It required a lot of pain. It required that struggle that we had to persist through to even get to that point. So I pray that even future generations beyond that continue just to move the ball forward.
But we have social media now, that we didn't have, when I was that age, my 20s, 30s, and even 40s, we didn't have, social media. I think social media can be bad, but it also can be really, really good because it can bring people together, people who wouldn't ordinarily, know about each other. And so I think that we have effectively used social media as well. Black women have.
Yeah, for sure. Social media has changed the face of a lot for good, but there's just so much sneaky stuff going on with social media. And I guess that's a conversation for another time. But looking at the bright side of it, yes, it does connect us. We do have that ability to connect in different ways and to learn from each other in different ways too.
Exactly.
Spread that word like of this is what's happening right now, and we can kind of support people and get behind them versus that one person maybe experiencing a microaggression, for example, and not really having any like, well, what do I do with this? Who can I talk to
Right,
about?
exactly. Exactly. Because sometimes we just need that space, to be able to just not be judged and just not, not even when sometimes there is no answer per se, just being heard and just having somebody else affirm you.
Right.
Can be very healing. And that's part of it. That's a big part of what this movement is all about. It's about healing and correcting the harm that has been done.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I know that there's been like a greater awareness of the impacts of racism on mental health. And again, we're in this quote unquote post-racial. I keep laughing when I say that.
We are not in a post-racial
Right.
society. We are not in a post-racial society.
No.
That term came out when Barack Obama was elected president. But based on everything that we've seen, in the ensuing years, absolutely not. Nobody should be using this word post-racial society because it is definitely not post. It is a racialized world. And we see it every single day. We saw it last week with the two Tennessee legislators who were expelled from their posts, from their office, and the white woman wasn't. So there were three of them that were supporting high school students who were protesting about gun control because there had been a mass killing at a Catholic school in Nashville, Tennessee. And so the students came to the State House to call for tighter gun control. And these three Democratic legislators joined their protest. And because the head of the legislature said that they broke decorum, they were expelled from their roles as legislators. Now, one has been reinstated. But the point is that the white woman was not. They took a vote and they voted the two black men out. They did not vote the white woman out. And the white woman said, the only difference is the color of my skin. So she recognized the racism. But that's just a recent example. The attacks on Attorney General Alvin Bragg in New York around the stuff with Donald Trump. And Donald Trump has called him all sorts of racist kinds of names. And so, we can just go deep in terms of what's happening. Kids in schools who are traumatized by racial slurs and whatnot. So no. We do not live in any kind of post-racial world.
Yeah, definitely agree. And leading into that, I was going to ask, what work still needs to be done? I just feel like Black people have already done enough, but these issues are still happening. They're still happening. Decades and
Yeah,
decades.
that's because society doesn't want it any other way. When you have power, you don't want to give up that power. And they feel that it's a scarcity mentality. So if I give more to you, then that means I get less, rather than an abundance mentality that there's enough for all, and that we are all human, and that we all deserve the same rights. And so unless you change that mentality, and so I hear the younger people saying that it's not our work to do, it's white people's work, to do. While I might agree with that in concept, I just don't think that's going to happen. Look who's doing the work. I mean, look who's doing the work around the country for Black people, for rights of Black people. It's Black women, it's Black men. There are so many Black women who are in the movement, who are doing such, great things. The Black Lives Matter young ladies, I can't call their names right now, but, that's how that movement started. But, Black women and other, the stuff that Kimberly Crenshaw does, the contributions that people like Nicole Hannah-Jones are making. And, the list goes on and on of Black women who are, people like Shonda Rhimes, of course, Oprah, but that list goes on and on about contributions that Black women are making, not just in their field, but speaking up and out about inequalities and equity, and leading that charge, even though, as you say, it's not our work to do, but it always has been our work to do, and I don't see that changing.
So how do we move forward? Because I know that in the book that you gave some things, I think they were geared obviously more specifically to white people, like reparations. And I'll let you talk about it, like reparations, changing the systems, what you talked about before. And then obviously just understanding that we can't catch up with hard work is what you said, and it can't be done individually. What are some ways forward for Black women?
So I think what Black women are doing is what we need to do, band together, collaborate. We haven't, the system doesn't incentivize us necessarily to work together. The system incentivizes us, to be like the crabs in the barrel, right? One comes and pull the other one down. And I think I'm seeing that change. And so I think that we need to continue to do that, continue to lift each other up, continue to collaborate, continue to looking at ways that I can do some better partnering with my company after 39 years. I'm talking to some other women entrepreneurs who do things kind of similarly to me. And how can we share resources? How can we, do this work, together rather than separately? So I think that's something. I think, for Black women listening here, it's really, do take care of yourself. I'll just really, really focus on your well-being and not be guilty about it. Enough is enough. You are enough. And I think so from an individual perspective, from a collective perspective, as I said, we need to be that collective. We need to reach out in unison, loud voices. We still have a lot of factions. We have our sororities, right? Which you can only get into a sorority if you have a college degree. And then we have other sort of what you call elite Black organizations, right? And those elite Black women organizations don't always connect well with the activist type of woman. So you've got the elite Black women who, like the luxury life, and, it's about acquiring material things, right? I'm making a statement. And then you have Black women just as educated, just as smart. That's not important to them. What's important to them is the cause. What's important to them. And I'm not saying the quote elite Black women is not important to them. I'm just saying that they may be less likely to come together with the activists to be a part of a protest. I think we need to do more of that. I think we need to look at our own hierarchy among Black women. Yeah. So that would be something I would say we should do.
I just have a couple more questions. Like, what do you do for self-care?
Oh, what do? I go to the Caribbean. I go to Barbados. I love Barbados. I sit on the beach. That's my
I love
that.
that.
Yeah.
Travel, beach, sun, all
Mhm.
those good things. Oh, I love that. I'm gonna ask you about liberation. Oh, how do we start to heal from Black fatigue?
Well, I mean, I think that is it. I mean, healing from Black fatigue is about taking care of ourselves, is about knowing that we're enough. It is about saying no, setting boundaries, and being okay with setting those boundaries. So we set boundaries, and then we feel guilty. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't. No, that was a boundary. So I think that all of that is how we heal from Black fatigue, and listen to our bodies, listen to our mind. If it feels like you should take a break, take a break.
Hmm.
And we haven't done that oftentimes because we feel, if I do that, I'm not going to have enough money for this. If I do that, I'm going to lose this job. If I do that. So we have to be, we have to think about it. And right. We don't want to just say, okay, Mary Frances told me I need to rest. So I'm going to, leave and quit my job.
Right.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm more or less saying that figure out what you need and then figure out a way to get what you need, because it's there. The universe is there to supply everything that you need and want. It's already there. You just have to be innovative enough, to think broadly enough. How can my mother used to say, never let me say I can't. She would always say it's how can I?
Mm-hmm.
How can I? And it may take a little bit longer. It may take a little bit longer, but the question is not I can't. The question is how can I?
Powerful. And then my final question, as we wrap up our conversation, is there a message of support you'd like to leave for the Black woman who's listening to us today and she just feels exhausted? Like, is there a final word that you could give her?
I would say just affirm, find a mirror, look in that mirror and say, I am everything.
Mm.
I am beautiful. I am enough. And it is okay for me to rest.
Heard. Definitely heard. So where can we find you and your books, Mary Frances?
So the books are on Amazon, but I always recommend that you try to find an independent Black bookstore, and they're there as well. So Black Fatigue, How Racism Erodes the Mind, Body, and Spirit. The newest book is Racial Justice at Work, and it talks about the workplace and racial justice, practical solutions for systemic change. And I wrote a book before that called We Can't Talk About That at Work, How to Talk About Race, Religion, Politics, and Other Polarizing Topics. So all of the books, though, you can initially find them on Amazon. But again, look up your independent Black bookstore in your location.
Got it. And if someone wants to follow you on social media, you're on Instagram, I know.
Instagram, Facebook, MF Winters or Mary F. Winters. Not really sure which it is, but yeah, you can find me. Definitely find me on LinkedIn. Definitely find me on Instagram and on Facebook, Mary Frances Winters. And the company name is the Winters Group Incorporated. The Winters Group Incorporated.
Awesome. I'll be sure to put that information where they can find you and everything in the show notes for today's episode as well. So that's it for the conversation. I just want to thank you so much for being in this space with me, spending time with me today, and allowing us to dive deep into this fatigue that I know a lot of us are feeling. I'm just very appreciative of just everything that you are.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, and all the best to you on everything that you're doing. Keep it up because we need you.
Thank you. Thank you.